All right. So I've got Trevor Steel here, and Trevor, the Escape Club. What does the name mean? The Escape Club. What does that mean?
That's a very, you know what? We've been asked that so many times, and I used to make up stories about what it actually means.
Okay.
But really, what the truth of it is that we were sitting around. I think one of the hardest things in the world to do is to think of a name of a band. And
Right.
we were all sitting around somebody's apartment and coming up with all these different names. And John, the guitarist, came up with the Escape Club.
Okay.
And we went, yeah, that's all right. We like that. We're not going to fight each other over that. So all it meant, and then people used to ask the same question: "What's it mean? What's it mean?" And we said, "Oh, we're escaping from this music or that music." Truthful was, Gary, it was a name we liked the sound of, and we stuck with it.
Hey, it worked. At least you agreed with it, and at least it didn't come up with something like the rotten eggs or something.
That's true. I mean, looking back at it though, I would like to have come up with something. In some ways, a one-word name or something would have been better because it would stick in people's minds. But hey,
Yeah.
it's fine. We did okay, so you're not complaining.
That's right. There's I think there's a reality TV show called The Escape Club. Did they ask your permission? Can we use? I don't. Is that something that I'm just saying? Is it The Escape Club? I didn't even realize it, but yeah, they've got a TV show. I think it's on E Network. But
Yeah, you can't. Well, I suppose you can trademark a name, but it costs so much money. We never did that.
never did.
But as long as we come up in the Google searches, which we still do, that's okay. I'm happy with that.
That helps. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
So, what would you describe the sound of your music? How would you describe that?
We kind of evolved over the years, but I think if you're talking about the time when our biggest hits were around, we used to call it like a dance rock hybrid. And I think, quite honestly, I don't think there were many people doing it. In Excess did that a little bit as well. Jesus Jones, another band who did. So we kind of just mixed a few dance grooves with heavy guitars, really. Yeah.
Right. I remember when I first heard y'all, it was like, this was like In Excess. It was like another In Excess, which is, but you had your own thing going. It's really cool songs, and I liked the sound. I liked everything about it, and so how did you get your start? As far as I know you play guitar and sing. How did you say, I want to play guitar, I want to sing, I want to do this, I want to be in a band? How did that come to be when you were younger?
Well, yeah, me personally, when I was really failing badly, well, not failing, I wasn't very interested in school. It's like, I did okay, but it's just, I just didn't like being told what to do.
join the club here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of guys who form bands would tell the same story. So,
right.
I was in a really good school, but a couple of buddies of mine, in fact, one of them, the guy called Red, who plays drums with us now, he was a friend from all those years back. He was already in a band. John, the guitarist, was already in a band. I couldn't play anything, but I turned up one day to watch them rehearsing, and I thought, yeah, you know what, I'd really like to do this. So I started off as a roadie. I used to go around carrying their gear and everything and all that stuff. And then Red started teaching me to play guitar. And from then on, I just got absolutely besotted with the idea of writing songs and singing and all that. And it took over my life, really. Yeah.
Well, that worked out pretty good. Yeah. It seems like it was just meant to be for you to do all that, right?
Well, it felt like that. But then you get to the age of 27 or 26, 27, still nothing's happened. And you start questioning yourself,
Right. Yeah, I understand that totally. So how did the band form? We
formed, really, it's strange because I think back in those days, there were a lot more sort of gigs and stuff to go to, especially around London where we come from. And it was an amalgamation. The band kind of evolved. People left, people joined, and there was another band called the Espressos who were doing really well, but they split up. And Johnny, the bass player, and Milan, the drummer, were in that band. And me and John were in the kind of new romantic band before that called Mad Shadows. And we kind of just amalgamated into the Escape Club. So we came from a pop background, which was the Espressos, from a new romantic background, and we all love rock music. So we just kind of thought, let's form a new band.
Wow.
That's how we did it.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, and so, how did y'all first get noticed in America whenever the album came out?
That was kind of weird because that album, the Wild Wild West album, was our second album.
Right.
So the first album, just when it came out in the UK, we were doing okay over here, playing in sort of medium-sized clubs and all that stuff. Then we made the Wild Wild West album with Chris Kinsey, and our management company managed to get us a deal in the States. And I've told this story before on other podcasts and stuff. We were sitting in London watching our single become. It was going up the Billboard charts. It started off, I was really excited when it made the top 50. And then it just kept going and going. And we were just sitting in a country who didn't really care much about us, watching our single rocket up to be number one. So I didn't actually get to visit the United States until we've already had a number one single, which is kind of weird.
Wow.
Yeah, really strange experience. Yeah, very odd.
And you were talking about how, in the song Wild Wild West, I know it was number one, but over in England, it didn't even chart. So how come they didn't ever latch on to your success over there? How come they didn't appreciate you over there like they did in America?
Well, I totally blame the record label, to be honest. We were signed to two different labels, and the label Atlantic that we were signed to in America, they worked it really hard, and it was a hit. It was a hit all around the world, really, but we were signed to another label. It was WEA, it's part of the same thing, in the UK, and they just didn't work it. It just wasn't. It just didn't catch with the company. I think that's the truth of it.
Right.
Very odd.
Yeah, it really is. So the song Wild Wild West, I love the video. It looked like a lot of fun to make. How was it? Do you remember making the video and how fun it was to do?
Yeah, I do. It was obviously it's back in the days before video sort of techniques and everything. So those weird shapes were all done with mirrors. If you remember the video, there's all these arms and legs, and that was done using professional dancers. So we were, with a white background, we were performing, and I remember sort of performing to the camera, and there was these dancers like next to us, really strong legs and arms, just getting them in these perfect positions. Right. And then they were on the old fairground mirrors, like which distorted the image. Yeah. And so the video director very cleverly made these images from their legs and arms. It was just very clever guy, the guy who did it.
Yeah, I remember it very well. Yeah, it's awesome to see that. Yeah, freaked me out though. I remember like, how'd they do all that? I didn't understand how they were doing it. Now I know. I was like, oh, it was weird.
Yeah, and I think that's what really helped it become a hit. I think it was a big favourite on MTV because it was so weird, Yeah.
And in the song itself, what's the meaning behind Wild Wild West?
Well, I wrote the lyrics mainly about living in the Western world, really. I was sitting in London, and we had Thatcher in government, you had Reagan, and they were all pointing missiles at the Soviet Union, and we all thought we were all going to die the next day, and AIDS had come along as well. And I just think it's about being a little bit paranoid and living in a Western city with all that going on. That was the background to the lyrics, really,
Right.
So the Wild Wild West was the Western world I was writing about, really, Yeah.
And that song was, so fun to listen to, and the video was so fun to watch. But I guarantee you that most of the people didn't realize that that's what that was about. They're just, hey, wow, cowboys, and we're going to dance.
No, that's right, and that's fine. That's fine because that's what they call crossover, right? It's one of those things, Yeah,
hey,
yeah, exactly.
It works like that, even better. It's double. Whenever you get you can listen to a song and it means this to this person, this to this person, but it works out, so that's good.
Yeah. The lyrics were intentionally like that. I didn't make them too pointed, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in that song, how long did it take you to write that song?
Oh, really quickly, and I think the best ones do. We had that written within a day. Yeah, it just happened. It just worked, and that's often the way with a good song,
Right. Yeah, I agree. And then the part, I think the part in the middle of the song, the little breakdown part, like the rapping part, and it's and it's, you know, I'm talking about, what is it? The little
Yeah,
transition
the
in the middle.
toasting.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
So how did that come to be? How did you go? You know, we're going to put this in the middle and make it kind of transition. How did that? How do you
Well,
visualize that?
the reason we did that was we had it as a 3-minute song. We wrote it as a 3-minute song, and then we went into the studio with Chris Kinsey, and we'd all agreed that, look, this sounds like a single. And you know, back in the day, we had 12 inches, didn't we? You know, 12-inch records, mixes, and stuff. Right. We said, well, look, you know, instead of cutting loads of bits of tape up and pushing them all around the studio and sticking them together, why don't we just record the 12-inch? We called it 12-inch length, and then we'll edit it back down to a single. Right. So all those drop downs and the rap and the extra verse and the guitar solo, all of that was put on for the 12-inch. And we'd finished recording it, put the whole thing on, and went, well, this is too good. We can't edit it. Yeah. So it turned out being a really long single for radio. Back in the day, you wanted to be under 3 minutes, really. Yeah. And that song, I think for radio, it got to about 5 minutes. You know, so yeah, yeah, that's how that worked.
I remember that. I remember there was like a shorter version, and there was like an extended version that they would play too.
That's right.
And the video too. And I was like, I like the longer version because you want more and more.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so they would cut it off. I'm like, no, I want to hear the longer version. You know, but
yeah, that's right. That's how it works. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And when we play it live now, we milk it. We're up there for 10 minutes with that song. So, yeah,
there you go. But in the band, it you know, the songs always just sounded full of life and fun. And like I said earlier, you know, it reminded me of NXS and bands like that. Did you ever run into those guys or play with them or anything, NXS?
Yeah, we never played with them. We met them in New York. I lived in Australia for a while as well, so I met some of the guys down there. So we kind of bumped into each other, and we were aware that we were both making the same sorts of sounds. I think, you know, I'd love to have done a gig with them. Really would have done, but that just never happened. Yeah, it would have been fun.
Yes, it sure would have. And so the single "Wild Wild West," it goes to #1. Then you had another single right after that, right?
Yeah, we had "Shake the Shake."
Yes. Was that a fun song to make? I remember the video for that looked, you know, fun too. And I remember the song was a great song.
Yeah, that was great. That was good fun. I think we released it too soon because Wild Wild West was still getting played. I think the trouble with Wild Wild West, we didn't realise how big the song was. So Shake got kind of a bit eclipsed by it, but it still did well. I think it made the top 20, but in my memory, I can't remember. I'm really bad at that stuff, but it did really well. Yeah, and it was fun. It was along the same sort of lines, you know. Yeah.
So how do you know when you were talking about, you know, the success of Wild Wild West? You know, when you're releasing singles, how do you realize, you know, we need to release another single? How many singles are you going to release? How do you think about stuff like that?
Well, you know, those days it was down to the label. Really, you kind of just their marketing teams told you what to do. Really, I think when you made an album, you had to, if you were capable of it, you had to have at least 3 singles on there, and they always wanted a ballad as well. You know, right. So you always had to have those options to give to them. And then, you know, if you were lucky and smart enough, you probably made songs that, you know, if I could go back in time, I'd change it a lot because we didn't pay that much attention to it, and we probably should have done, you know. But yeah, that's how it works.
Well, and the next album was released like 3 years later, the Dollars and Sex album.
Yeah.
So how do you think that album differed than the first album?
It differed. Well, the big hit off of that was "I'll Be There," which was a ballad.
Right.
I think it differed in that we kind of consolidated our sound a bit more. It was a little bit more cut up and programmed, a little bit more dance based really than the Wild West album. There's a song there I really enjoy playing live now called "Call It Poison," where we sampled a Ian Gillan scream off of Deep Purple, and just had a bit of fun with that. So there's a little bit more sampling on that one, I'd say. Yeah.
And you released the hit song "I'll Be There" was the second single, right, that you released? Is that
yes? Right? Yes, it was. It's funny how you were talking about In Excess, it's when I met them. We were Call It Poison was the first single, and it was very rock based. It was more rocky than Wild West, really. I really liked it. We all really liked the single, and the label seemed, Atlantic Records was like, yeah, this is gonna be a Smash's big hit, you know. And I remember being at the In Excess show in New York, and the label were really excited, and they said, oh yeah, all the radio stations, you know, the lower, what do you call them, P3s or whatever, they're all picking it up.
Yeah. And
then it's almost like overnight, all the big stations just started playing ballads. Right. It went into that weird situation, you know, the pre-Nirvana stage, where all of a sudden all the big hair bands and that were putting ballads out. Right. It was around about that time, and I remember going in to do radio interviews and hearing what they're playing as you're driving in and you're in there, and then they put our single on it. It was like, whoa, that's just like knocks your head off compared to all the other stuff that was out there.
Right.
And I think we suffered from that a little bit with Call It Poison, because the big stations didn't really play it as much as they were playing the ballads. So that's why I'll Be There went out as the next single, and I'm pleased it did, because it was a big hit. So,
I remember.
Yeah,
and I was just thinking about that too, because a lot of the hair bands, as you call, you know, they were dying out because of alternative music was coming in, and I think the way for them to make it was to throw out a ballad, because it had a different effect on people, and it really worked. So I think that was the reason, right? Because ballads will sell, but if you try to do your same old rock sound, it started to die out. Although I think, you know, like the Escape Club In Excess would have still transitioned through that, because it was different, you know. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. I think radio was to blame for the hair bands doing the ballads, but I think the 80s look and sound had run its course. Yeah. And if you look back at it now, everyone was dressed like Christmas trees. You know, it was getting more and more ridiculous. Right. You know, it's like Prince was putting on these massive shows, and I mean, it was great, but it was so. And I remember really well. I remember we'd come off a tour or something. I was in Connecticut, and we'd finished our album, and I think I'll Be There was about to come out, or it was around about that time. I can't get the dates right, but I do remember very clearly that where I was staying, the kid downstairs had just brought the Nirvana album. Mm. And it's probably post I'll Be There, actually. And I remember hearing it and going, whoa, what's that? And then I saw it on MTV, and I thought, yeah, it's all changed. This is it. You could just sense it, because they were just wearing T-shirts, and it was really grimy video, an amazing song, you know, and it was like, yeah, this is where it's going. And I felt, and that was one of the reasons that we kind of split up around that time, because we knew we had to change, because you just look at that and just go, well, what we're doing isn't as relevant anymore, you know, times have moved on.
Right. And sad to say, though, I mean, you know, I look back to it and I think I wish they could have kind of had a separate, you know, thing going, like, hey, we're going to keep doing this, and you can enjoy this and this, you know, and to me, alternative just meant an alternative to the regular sound. So if you take away the regular sound, you're not the alternative anymore, I guess. You're just it. Right?
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I think it's changed so much now, but yeah, it goes in and out, and you're always victim to the labels who they're signing, and you're also in those days, especially radio, radio just looks on as music as the noise between the commercials, right? That's so right. They don't really care. They just want the right people listening to their shows, and they go out and do research and everything. And you know, if at the moment we're targeting mothers and in their mid-30s, well, they're going to want to hear ballads. You know, they're not going to want to hear heavy rock.
That's right.
So that was a lot of it, really. And the indie stations, I love the alternative radio stations. They were my go-to place to listen. They just sort of seemed to, I don't know what happened, but they kind of disappeared, you know. I don't know why. They just did.
It's a different world today than it used to be, as far as radio stations and music and how it's released, you know, things like that, you know. So the song, though, I'll Be There, I remember the video and I remember the song. It's so beautiful. What was the meaning of that song?
Well, I wrote it as I was sort of imagining being a ghost coming back and singing to to your loved one, really.
Right.
And that's why it's touched so many people, I suppose. It's because a friend of ours, his wife had died a couple of weeks before, and we were all a bit touched by it. I just sort of thought, well, if I wanted to write to my wife or my, or my family, or what would I say? And I kind of did it as if I was already gone, writing the song as a ghost, and that's how it kind of turned out. Yeah.
It's a beautiful song, But do you ever
Thank you. Yeah.
It's definitely one of the best songs ever. Honestly, it's a great song, and the video, though, I remember seeing like everybody was under the water. I remember you were sitting like in a chair, and it was zooming into your eye, and it was going through there. Then it was like the water scene. Was that a fun video to make, or complicated? How did that work out?
Yeah, it was a really scary video to make. So the reason you see me sitting in a chair is because they filmed me underwater and it looked terrible. So the idea was to film the whole thing underwater, which is a clever idea. Except what they didn't take into account is that none of us had really dived before, and we were in a big, massive, great big chamber, weighted down, relying on divers bringing air to us. It's scary. So A, you're scared. B, when you're underwater, you look terrible, and they didn't really think about that. So we're all puffy. So really, Milan, the drummer, saved it because he was braver than the rest of us, and he went down there and did his part. But and the girl who was the model in it, she was brilliant. She was really. If we hadn't have had her, we'd have had to scratch it, to be really honest. But it worked out well enough, Yeah.
Yeah. I remember her hair was flowing. Yeah, that was nice. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
A lot of the effects were great in that song, which it brought the song to life, and it was a real special song. And yeah, that was a great moment. And so, did y'all have another single after "I'll Be There"? How did that work out after that song was so huge? Was it like another Wild Wild West where you had to, wait for it to die down and then see what happened?
Yeah.
So what happened after that?
It was really, it was so big yet again. We kind of learned from our mistakes. And I think the record label at that time just said, well, we're going to leave it at that, really. We did put out So Fashionable, but they didn't really, it wasn't a proper single release. It was just a song that went out to radio. But it wasn't, because like I was saying, that the whole musical landscape had changed, and really, quite honestly, I'll Be There was the only song off that album that really would have fitted on radio. And luckily for us, it went to number 8, so can't complain. That's the way it was. Yeah.
And so, after like what we're talking about with the alternative music and music changed and everything, and I guess the band decided to go separate ways for a time. Is that what happened?
Well, yeah, and it was a financial decision, unfortunately. We weren't being looked after financially. We sold a lot of records, we didn't see any of the money. It's a story that so many bands from our era tell. And we just couldn't afford to carry on, really. We all went back to London and talked about it and went, well, this is going to be really tough. And that I don't think the heart was there, because we weren't getting much help from everybody above us, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think there was a musical direction thing. I regret it now. I think we should have stuck together, but we just didn't. So, it's one of the many regrets in life that we didn't. And we just went off our separate ways for a while. Yeah.
So, I know, like you said, a lot of the bands out there have faced those situations where they don't see the money. Is there something in the contract that you miss, when they say, there's not like a little small, fine print that says, we're going to take all of this and you're not going to get anything. I mean, there's got to be something, that stands out. How do people miss that?
There's a quote, the big print giveth and the small print taketh away. And that's so true. But the truth is, if you are a young band with going nowhere, and somebody comes and waves a contract in front of your nose, you're going to sign it, right? It's just the way it is. And for time immemorial, the record labels have always taken more than they should have done.
Yeah.
It's down to accounting. We never got accounted to. I could carry on with all the, it was just, they just take the piss, to use an English term. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, and there's nothing you can do about it, because you're still poor. You can't sue them. You know, it's not the label so much as the management company. It's everybody all making a few bucks off you, and you're the last person in the chain. That's just the way it is. Yeah, I mean, we made a bet. We made money from publishing, and you know, it's like, but I know that there was money elsewhere that we didn't get, and it does get to you a bit sometimes, you know.
Right. Yeah, I bet it does. So after a while, the band got back together, recorded a new album, right? After it was, how many years was it? A lot of years.
Oh, a long time, like 20.
So
yeah.
So what happened there? How did y'all get back together?
So John and I, the guitarist John and I, we carried on after the band split up as a production team, and we made quite a lot of records over in the UK. It did quite well. So we'd stuck together in that sense. And then fate led us to Australia. So I was living in Australia. John was, and he still lives there now. And we were making records, and we just thought, you know what, let's make an Escape Club record. And while we've got time, we got studio time, let's just slowly put one together, which would be great fun. We contacted the other two guys, Johnny and Milan. Johnny, unfortunately for Johnny, he was going through an awful time because his wife was about to pass away. Milan wasn't really interested in doing it, doing his own thing. So it was just me and John, really. And then that's when we asked Red, our friend who lives in Los Angeles, drummer that we've known for years and years. He got involved. So we put the album together, Celebrity. Really enjoyed it, and we just put it out independently. You know, just the new way of doing things, and we got quite a lot of great reviews on Amazon and stuff like that. It shifted quite a few copies, and I really loved that album. It was really, really good fun. I'm pleased we did it.
And so how do you like that as far as releasing your own music as opposed to the way it used to be? I know it's a lot different, but it's a lot easier and probably not as stressful to release your own music, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and you do it, quite honestly, Gary, you do it for the art because you're not going to make a huge amount of money out of it. But it's still good to do. And it's good because when we go and gig and stuff, we've got a body of work that we can play. And it's also nice to be more up with the times. So when we do record new songs, they're more current, which is so we're not always going back and doing the 80s stuff all the time. So we've got our sound, and our sound just has developed through, you know. Yeah.
So you said that your sound kind of changed over the years. What sound would you say you have now compared to the way you used to be?
I think, well, we're making another album now. Johnny, the bass player, is back with us, which is great. So we're making another album. So I can quote on that. I think it's a little bit more relaxed than we used to be because we're all getting a bit older, right? So we're kind of trying to make music that people of a certain age are more likely to listen to. So it's probably not quite as heavy, but it's still got loads of guitars. Hard to describe your own music. That's a really weird one. It sounds like us, but it's a bit more mature, is what I'd say.
Well, you have a lot of fans over the years. Do you gain new fans that go, I like this music, like the younger fans that want to hear some new music like that too? Yes,
surprisingly we do. And I realised that we went on the Lost 80s tour last year, and you meet people at the meet and greet afterwards. A lot of people were coming up with their sons and daughters, and they were saying, oh yeah, we're really into your stuff and all this sort of thing. So you do realise there are people out there listening to us and still enjoying it, which is kind of nice, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure. So you were talking about a new album, working on that, and what about touring? Are things starting to open up, or is there going to be some places to go eventually?
Well, eventually, I think once the pandemic sorts itself out, really, because all the gigs that were booked have been, as you know, been cancelled.
Right.
So I think there's a backlog of gigs. We were due to go out this year, but I don't think we will. If nothing else, we can't get health insurance to go travel to the US. So that, unless we have health insurance, I'm certainly not going to the US without health insurance. It would bankrupt me. So I think we'll possibly go out in 22 if there's something there. We're talking to. There's a couple of people talking to us. It just has to be the right gigs. You know, has to suit us financially, etc., etc. But we really would like to get out there again. You know, yeah.
Yeah. I always think about these bands, that were really, especially really big back in the 80s and 90s, that kind of get together on a bill. That would be really cool to see, maybe.
Oh, it's great. I mean,
with y'all.
Yeah, last year we were with Wang Chung and Flock of Seagulls
Awesome.
and Martha from the Motels. I mean, it was just such good fun, And if we can do that again, I'd love to do it, Yeah.
So awesome, man. Well, I won't keep you. Hey, I know you're calling from a long way away, and
I am.
it's almost 7 o'clock, I guess, there at night there, right? So
Yeah, it's getting on. I'm getting hungry.
I was gonna say you might want to grab something to eat. But I appreciate you talking to me, Trevor. I mean, I've been, like I said, a big fan for all these years, and I'll be posting this podcast everywhere. And
yeah, I mean, it's been great talking to you. So I've really enjoyed it.
well, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to whatever you do, the new music and everything else, man. Take care, okay?
I'll keep you posted. All right. Thanks, Gary. See ya.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Bye, man.